Jack Fenner has always lived in the shadow of his brother, Gary. Since childhood, Gary had been a hero to everyone, smart, strong, unafraid of anything and anyone. And Jack, the youngest of the brothers, all his life endured this overwhelming sense of inadequacy, as if everyone around him emphasized his insignificance, unconsciously or on purpose. Every success of Gary's was like a hammer blow, distancing Jack from his own life. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a long struggle for his own identity. And now, years later, here they were, in this damned underground bunker. Gary was into all kinds of extreme adventures, and Jack, not wanting to appear weak once again, agreed to go with him into this radioactive underground. Reactor, bunker, ruins, Gary described the place as if it were a playground. But as they descended into the dark, endless tunnels, the reality was much darker and creepier. As they wandered through the abandoned corridors, Gary disappeared, leaving Jack alone with his eternal fear of being abandoned, forgotten, lost. Now Jack wasn't just in his brother's shadow, he was lost in it. Left alone in the pitch-black darkness, Jack was forced to fight for his life and his identity. Jack walked by feel, clutching the old backpack that held the only remaining source of light, a weak flashlight that flickered every time Jack stumbled over rusty pipes or broken panels. The cold darkness here wasn't empty, it was pressing, moving, as if it were preparing to devour him itself. "Damn it, Gary, where are you?" he muttered through gritted teeth, feeling his voice dissolve into the infinity of the tunnel. He tried to focus on remembering the route Gary had scrawled on the map. But the map seemed useless now, every turn was like every other, and the dark spots on the walls were like reminders of something old, abandoned, long forgotten. Suddenly the flashlight flickered and went out. Its faint light vanished, leaving Jack in total darkness. Jack's heart pounded like a drum, dizzy with panic. He struck the flashlight with his hand, and the light flickered again. But what he saw in its faint beam made his blood run cold. There was something on the floor ahead. It wriggled slowly, as if trying to escape the light. The rotting, gray-green corpse of a man, or what had once been a man. The skin looked like parchment stretched over bone, and the eyes, large, colorless, empty, stared straight at Jack. "Is that you, Gary?" Jack exhaled, but he couldn't believe his own words. The creature hissed hoarsely in response, lunging toward him like an animal lunging for prey. He ran, unable to see where he was going. The tunnels merged into one long spiral, pulling him deeper and deeper, farther and farther from the surface, from light, from sanity. His head buzzed with fear and radiation, and every step was like a leap into the abyss. But running was the only escape. It's not Gary. It's not him. It's something else. His thoughts rattled off in a half-crazed torrent of panic. He stumbled and fell, hitting his face on the cold concrete. Red liquid ran down his cheek, but Jack felt no pain. Only fear. And darkness. When he picked up the flashlight again, the light illuminated a familiar wall. There was a strange symbol painted on it, as if carved by the hands of a man who realized the end had come. Gary would never have done that. So he wasn't the first one here. "The tunnel is changing shape," Jack muttered, trying to figure out what was happening. "Am I going crazy?" He heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Not fast, but heavy, as if the creature that had been following him had just emerged from a deep swamp and was now slowly approaching. "Gary?" he shouted in a last desperate attempt, but only a rumbling sounded in response. Darkness was consuming his mind. He tried to picture his brother as he remembered him, confident, strong, with a smirk on his face, but instead his image slowly faded away. It was as if he had never existed at all. Just darkness and cold and this cursed place. He was alone, and fear gripped him to the point of suffocation. Minutes or hours passed. Jack lost track of time. He slowed his steps, his legs felt woozy, and the light from the flashlight faded. There was no point in running anymore. The creature was getting closer, its footsteps louder and closer. But suddenly he saw the light ahead, not dim, as from the flashlight, but bright, natural, warm. A light that called out. His consciousness wavered on the edge between reality and madness, but he moved forward nonetheless. The light came from an old metal hatch at the end of the hallway. Jack reached it and, opening the heavy door, found himself in a spacious hall. A man stood before him. It was Gary. But somehow he didn't look scared or lost. He stood as he always did, confident, with the same smirk. "You did it, brother," he said, holding out his hand. "I knew you could do it." It was a test. Jack stepped forward in confusion, but then it clicked in his head. A test? This was all orchestrated? He squinted, trying to figure out if what was in front of him was reality or another illusion. A test? Jack's voice shook with anger and disbelief. "You left me there to die." "No," Gary replied calmly. "I wanted you to go through it. You never believed in yourself. Now you see that you can survive. You're stronger than you think." Jack's mind was racing with 100 thoughts. He wanted to scream, to punch, to let out all his pent-up anger, but instead he just fell to his knees, feeling the fear and panic slowly release him. Everything up to this point seemed insignificant. He had been through hell, but not alone. Gary stepped closer and crouched down next to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We did it together," he said quietly, and there was a sincere warmth to it that Jack had never heard before. Their eyes met, and Jack realized that for the first time in their lives, they were truly equals. Jack rose to his feet, feeling the weight of the last few hours, months, maybe even a lifetime, slowly slipping from his shoulders. His body, which had seemed weak and broken before, now felt as if it were growing stronger. He felt like a different person. A light breeze came through the hole in the ceiling, bringing with it the scent of freedom. It was a breeze filled with freshness and life, as if it was washing away all the fear he had accumulated over the years. He looked at Gary, but this time his gaze was not full of envy or pain, but deep, warm respect. They were no longer enemies, no longer rivals. They were brothers. Real brothers. For the first time in their lives. "We did it, Gary," he whispered, and in those words was all the elation, all the power of victory over himself. Gary put his arm around his shoulders and nodded, smiling. But his smile was different. It was no longer the cocky grin that had irritated Jack since childhood. It was the smile of a man who had seen his brother finally find his way. And this moment was more precious than all the adventures, triumphs, and accomplishments. Jack lifted his head up, gazing into the light that came from the hatch. It was the light of a new beginning. The light of a new life, one in which there was no more room for old fears and doubts. It was their light. The light that Jack had been waiting for all his life, but didn't know how to reach. He took a step forward, climbing the stairs to the exit. Each step came easily, as if the earth itself were lifting him up. There was a kind of magic in the air, not dark and scary, but warm and enveloping. Every breath was filled with joy, as if even the air here knew that victory was near. When Jack climbed out, he saw a world that seemed unfamiliar, but at the same time familiar. The sunlight caressed his face, reminding him of how long it had been since he'd felt true warmth. The space around them was so bright, as if the sky itself was celebrating their release. Ahead stretched vast fields filled with life, greenery, and new possibilities. "We're free," Jack said loudly, as if to the world, as if the word were going to fly across the horizon. His voice echoed off the hills, turning into a joyful song.